everyone, and welcome to the 28th Raindance Film Festival Industry Forum. This lovely Saturday afternoon, I'm very proud to present a session dedicated to the issue of sexual harassment. We're going to talk about sexual harassment both in front and behind the camera, its representation, and the issue of sexual harassment on how it is addressed on set. We're very proud here at Raindance to present this session in partnership with 16 Day, 16 Films, a Caring Foundation and Modern Films initiative. 16 Day, 16 Films work and campaign with various very interesting organizations, including UK Says No More in the UK, but also other amazing organizations worldwide who advocate for women experiencing domestic and sexual violence. Here with me today are Sarah D'Angelis from UK Says No More, Elli Toivoniemi, calling from Helsinki, the director and producer of A Force of Habit in the festival's program. We have Yarit Dor, calling from London, and we have Teniece Divya Johnson, calling from New York City, I believe. Is that correct? East Coast. And we also have Ted Bunch from A Call to Man, calling in from New York. And last but not least, we have Akua Gyamfi calling in from London and representing the British Blacklist, who is going to be hosting the session. I'm going to now pass the microphone to Akua.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this wonderful discussion. It's a brilliant panel, and we already briefly introduced everyone, but I really want to go around the room, and if you guys could say your name and give a sentence about what it is you do, then we'll start the chat. So I'll start with Yarit, because that's what I can see first.
Hi everyone, I'm Yarit, or you can call me Yar, that's my nickname. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I work as an intimacy coordinator, mainly in the UK.
And Elli.
Hi, I'm Elli Toivoniemi. I'm producer director based in Helsinki, and one of the owners and one of the partners in the company called Tuffi Films.
And Ted.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ted Bunch. I'm the co-founder of A Call to Men. We do national and international work around promoting healthy and respectful manhood. We educate men all over the world around respectful manhood and preventing all forms of gender-based violence.
Thank you. And Sarah.
I'm Sarah D'Angelis. I'm the partnerships manager for UK Says No More, which is the national prevention and awareness campaign for domestic abuse and sexual violence. We co-created 16 Day, 16 Films with Modern Films a few years ago. And recently we just rolled out safe spaces for victims of domestic abuse to access specialist support safely. And currently that's in a quarter of all pharmacies in the UK at the moment.
Brilliant. And finally, Teniece.
Peace out, Teniece Divya Johnson. I'm a stunt performer and intimacy coordinator for TV, film, and stage.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome, as I said, to this wonderful discussion. I'm going to kick off with you, Elli, and because I hope you guys have all watched the wonderful film Force of Habit. Could you tell us about the film, a little bit about it, and how you came to work on it and why it's so important?
Yeah, I tried to do it shortly. Force of Habit is an anthology film directed by 7 directors, including myself. And it's part of an even bigger project that includes 11 short films and an outreach and impact campaign dealing with an issue, discrimination and gender stereotypes against women in society. And it all started 5 years back almost already, so quite far before Me Too happened. And it started really naturally that we all kind of like realized that we were constantly talking with female colleagues and women around that, are we really living in that equal world as we kind of like have learned and thought and internalized? And if so, why we seem to face every day these small kind of like weird cases that we feel discriminated or not treated well. And so that's how it all started. And then we kind of like got inspired by two amazing stage plays that were, one of called Play Rape, that dealt with the question that how does it feel to be on a stage every night and be raped, and another stage play that called Fat, that brought on a really bravely and funny way and touching way women's body on stage, and asking that kind of how does it feel when your body is under commenting like always and constantly. So then we invited these two directors actually behind these stage plays and a bunch of other great directors that we kind of like thought that you might have something to say around these issues and could be great to work with you. And everyone wanted to jump in. So it started kind of like really organically around this theme, and then it grew kind of like quite a big universe of 11 shorts and this anthology film.
Thank you very much. Sarah, with the work that you do, the film really touched on various scenarios where women experience sexual harassment. And just to break down some of the themes that the film, that Force of Habit covered, was like very recognizable situations, the unsolicited attention on public transport, inappropriate interactions with work colleagues, and especially there's one of the focuses, I guess, in relation to what the industry that we're talking about today, one of those actresses, an actress being silenced in a room full of men, discussing how they want a rape scene enacted and things like that. So Sarah, how normalized has sexual harassment become on a day-to-day basis?
First of all, I've watched the film and I thought it was fantastic. I just wanted to add that. And I loved all the kind of like different multiple layers. I think, sorry, just repeat that last question, sorry.
Literally, how normalized has it been? Because the film does touch on so many scenarios that was like, yeah, it can go over your head how normal it is.
Normalized. Yeah. I think it's normalized for the perpetrator who's just perpetrating this kind of abuse on a daily basis. And I think it's become normalized for us as either bystanders or for the victims of sexual harassment that we're kind of experiencing this on a day-to-day. And I think the way in which Force of Nature kind of conveys those messages in the film, I think for me, it was kind of like two scenes in particular that kind of demonstrate this quite nicely, is how we minimize experiences of sexual violence. So in particular with am I okay to say certain parts of the scenes? Is this okay, just to describe it?
I think so.
Yeah,
without spoilers.
No. But there's
please feel free. Spoil a tiny little bit, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. There was that line, there's just one line in there where it says, "It's not like you were raped."
Yes.
That was so powerful, because actually when we think of how we experience, sexual harassment every day, how women, are exposed to this, and kind of actually her own husband, the most trusted person who should understand and respect, her experience and what she's just experienced, is actually it minimizes her experience and kind of compares her trauma to other forms of sexual violence. And I think that message and how that was kind of conveyed in the film was just absolutely incredible. That for me was one of the most powerful messages. And then it also as you kind of say, it kind of explores kind of other topics as well, and kind of like issues around not just from a victim's perspective, which I think is really important. I think we need to kind of go back to listening to, to make any kind of action and change, we need to go back to listening to victims and survivors and their experiences in order to kind of like learn and then take action, and what we need to do in all different sectors, and especially, within the public, and create those kind of safe spaces. But I think it's anyone who's kind of involved in the film is that you were exposed to the processes of what happens when somebody experiences any form of sexual violence, whether or not it be court, whether or not it be the reporting process, whether it be the disclosure, and what happens after that, what's as a human being, regardless of your role, regardless of your profession, what's your response to that survivor and their experience? And that kind of, you know, that speaks volumes in the film.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, Yarit, when you turn this onto the lens of the film industry, some of the occurrences in the film, how in Force of Habit, how have you seen in your time where this has been amplified in moments where you've actually felt like, okay, something needs to change?
I mean, I think sets that bring an intimacy coordinator are already kind of ready to dive in and rethink about things, mostly. So on set, you do find that the pressure of the process sometimes brings out certain aspects, and that people don't necessarily, they don't kind of wake up thinking, oh, I'm going to be malicious to someone today, but the pressures and the anxiety of staying on time, getting the shot, sometimes can get in the way of certain things that on a daily basis you would not say or you would not do. So a set that already brings an intimacy coordinator is ready to slightly be challenged on something specific, whether it's reconsidering a line that someone just said or a behavior that was, you know, in the dressing room or slightly before, and just getting people to talk about that moment. So if it is a simulated sexual assault scene, there's a lot of conversations happening beforehand to mitigate the performer's feeling on set and to kind of help everyone be in the same line. And just conversations about language around that specific moment so people can feel like they're being held and they can be listened to within that anxious environment.
That's very fair. And I guess we've had, you know, we can't escape the headlines. We've had multiple men from the industry, from Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, R. Kelly, Bill Cosby, who've been called out in some way or other by brave women who finally said enough is enough. But Teniece, why do you think this has been able to go on for so long before people actually band together and said, look, we have to change this, especially from the film industry perspective?
I think it's like any other ism in our culture. This conversation reminds me a lot of the anti-racism conversation and the fact that when we engage in racism, it hurts everyone. It limits everyone's humanity. So I hear a lot of us talking about women being the victim of sexual harassment, but like I want to keep it 1,000 here. This goes across the board. It does not it doesn't matter what your gender expression is. And everyone is suffering from the way we've been socialized. Things that are important to me is the idea of with new information, we can change our mind, stop acting like only one person can be right and being reactionary in situations. And I think we need a lot more compassion because those people who engage in oppressive acts, they need help as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Did I miss your question there?
No, that's actually on point, because I'm trying to make sure that I ask everybody different questions so we get different responses, but that's actually fair because it is posed as a women's perspective, but it's, you know, it's not solely the issue of women, and both sides, without giving the predator or the, I don't know.
Can we use different language there instead of like, I don't know, predator and victim? Like these are people, right?
Yeah. So people on both sides of the situation. Instead of it's difficult, isn't it? It's a different place. It's a difficult space to navigate because you don't know what the right thing is to say, and this is what we're all learning and evolving at this point, how to deal with this, because it's something that's been so normalized. Something I was saying to Sarah, and I'm coming to Ted too, because actually, so just to jump from you to Denise too, Ted being the guy in the room, as it were, how do you feel when it is mostly positioned as predatory men, this is the language, and victimized women? From your perspective, what do you think went wrong when it came, what does society do? Why has this been able to, you know, continue, and how has it got this bad so fast? It's been forever actually. So how do you think it's got like this?
Thank you for the question, and the dialogue is great. And this is the conversation we need to have. So the work of A Call to Men, we work with men in the entertainment industry and sports. We have high school and middle school curriculums for youth. We work with Fortune 500 companies around sexual harassment in the workplace. And the theme is the same, and it's really what we're talking about here. And we wouldn't say predator. What we would say is that there's a collective socialization of manhood. There's things that men are taught, and that there's some men who do things that would be those things that we don't want to happen, the sexual harassment in the workplace, the sexual assault, the domestic violence. But those men are not much different from all men. We've all been taught that women and girls have less value than men and boys, that women are in some way the property of men, right? And that women and girls are sexual objects. Those are three things that we're all taught. So it's not about bad guys and good guys, toxic versus non-toxic, right? That's a buzzword now, but masculinity is not toxic. There's unhealthy and there's healthy from our perspective. So when we talk about the collective socialization of manhood, and we call it the man box, and there's these characteristics within the man box, and sexually objectifying a woman is one of those. So even when we look at, someone mentioned Harvey Weinstein. So it's been about 3 years now since Me Too has been reborn or rebirthed or gotten this new energy. Tarana Burke, of course, found it years ago. But then it became more of the national, international conversation when women of influence spoke out around it and women of privilege spoke out around it, which I'm grateful for, but that's part of the issue also. Teniece talked about isms. But I bring that up because as soon as that happened, we were sent out. Gloria Steinem is one of our board members, and she asked us to go out to Time's Up right away. And we were out there working with men and talking to folks in Time's Up and so forth around men, engaging men. And just for your listening audience, I just also want to say that while we talk about these things, intervention is always what we're looking to address. Something has to happen and we want to intervene. Well, our work at A Call to Men, and even this conversation for men, is to go upstream to prevention where it never happens in the first place. And that bridge from intervention to prevention is men, because if women could have stopped the violence that men perpetrated, they would have. Yeah. So it's really up to men, in the same way that racism, if Black folks could have stopped racism, they would have, believe me. Right? So it's up to the dominant group. So I say all that to say that this is not an indictment on manhood. It's an invitation to men. And that while men need to be called out, we need to be intentional about calling men in, because this is the only way it's going to happen. Yeah. So I say all that to say that when Me Too became part of this national, international conversation, and we're doing all this work with men, there's not a man I've met who hasn't either done something or said something that sexually objectified a woman, or witnessed another man doing something or saying something and did nothing about it. And I can say that confidently, no matter where I go in the US or internationally, because where there's sexual harassment, there's male dominance. Where there's male dominance, there's sexism. And then we're talking about patriarchy, right? Because it's all one thing. So I'll just wrap up here by saying that I can confidently say that because one of the ways that we prove that we're men is to objectify women. Yeah. You don't get to grow up as a male identified youth without passing those tests that other men put you through in this man box, because the man box, the glue that keeps the man box together is also homophobia and heterosexism, right? So when you don't objectify a woman, you're punished for that. Yeah. Based on this construct. So it's really about all of us. We're all part of the problem. And while most men don't do those things, we are silent about those that do. And that silence is as much of the problem as the abuse, sexual harassment, or the violence is. And that's where we have to speak to the silence.
Absolutely. Elli, then, to what Ted's saying, men talking to men about how to change was it socialized manhood?
Male socialization, sure. Male
socialization. So the counter to that is all women-only spaces, safe spaces where women can, I always say, take off your bra moment, where you can just really chill in this space where you don't feel pressured or objectified. But is that the solution? All women, no men. And how does working in that environment help to change the culture if we are creating women-only spaces? And this is, I guess, again, we talk about marginalized groups. They have similar issues, because like we create Black safe spaces, and you know what I'm talking about. So I'm just saying, is that the solution, to create one gender safe spaces and stuff like that? Yeah, Ellie, yeah.
Yeah, that's, well, there's no simple answer in that, I think. But I kind of like what came to my mind in this conversation. I've been thinking a lot that, like Sarah said, that I think it's question of that we need to turn the kind of like the conversation out of the victims to ourselves. And I think that what Me Too made obviously happen was that we were kind of like brought out that this is really happening. But instead of like bringing that out, we should definitely go in the pre-time that it's like why these things are allowed to happen. Because I'm pretty sure that most of the people on the planet disagree all kind of this discrimination and would not like to that to happen. But so long as it really happens on the level as it's happening all over, I think that it's quite of a too big step to take. So that brings kind of like these safe spaces are still needed in various things. I could say that, okay, maybe from the power position as we are here talking in that sense that, okay, when you have power in certain society and communities, then I think it's time to mix and kind of like really take those big steps and have these type of conversations. But unfortunately, it's not for all. It's, I think, and in that, like in our film, it felt really, it was kind of like the core of making it all happen, that we actually were able to talk freely together a year before we even went to financiers' tables. And I remember how it went, like in the beginning, most of us were super insecure. I had these moments like, is this really even a theme? Can we make a film? And is this like, is this is nothing, this is too small, this is just like, these things goes by. But because we were together and actually talking and respecting each other, come on, you are one of the most interesting, really great director, and having this like, as we all, and then we kind of like together realized that we have internalized the same, minimizing ourselves and putting our kind of like feelings back and all that. So I think that it needed that time that we did together, and were able to freely speak about also these insecure feelings. And now when it all happened, and we still get back to those moments that, okay, that we are still learning, it's like even after 5 years and all this whole process and everything, you could think that, oh yeah, now I know so much and I can behave so much better myself, but it's not true, because it takes time. So my answer would be that I definitely like to have these safe spaces available. But on the other hand, we can't all just go with the safe basis. Like, okay, it's not my thing to go further.
I fully agree. I am the co-chair of Time's Up UK's Women of Colour group, and it is that where we have that safe space. This is where we can be really honest with each other, and then we collect and we reinforce each other, support each other, and then we can present to the wider group, these are our issues in solidarity, and we know we've got a team behind us that can understand where we're coming from. So Sarah, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you previously worked in a rape crisis centre, so I can't imagine the women and girls that you spoke to and the stories that you heard. And in this moment where we're all sharing and unloading and being in our safe spaces to find ways to improve the industry, as it were, how did you take care of yourself and well-being when you were hearing these traumatic stories and experiences? And move on and then maybe find some solutions. I'm not maybe, yeah, find the solution, because this is what we're all kind of doing, trying to find a solution after hearing such traumatic experiences from people, and we don't necessarily all have the tools and how to manage that. You're still on mute, sorry.
Technology, sorry guys.
No.
I think self-care is such a big thing. I think that from a frontline perspective, whether or not it be, you know, listen to any kind of disclosure of, you know, trauma, somebody else's experience, you need to step away and just look after yourself in that moment afterwards. And then there's a period of, I think, like from a film industry and from that kind of perspective, from my experience, obviously working with survivors, it's once you're doing a piece of work, you know, and you're supporting a survivor as part of like their recovery and accessing that specialist support, you then have to put as a primary focus, you know, your own self-care, you know, as at the forefront. When we look at responding to sexual harassment and sexual violence within, like, say, like film industry, for example, and working with, you know, we've been working, you know, especially obviously rape crisis side, that's kind of completely kind of like different, but working with disclosures that come forward from kind of say like film industry. And I think that Me Too, and I know that obviously Ted, you were saying a little bit about this earlier, is that I think, you know, we've kind of, this movement has platformed so many conversations in so many different sectors, enabled industries before who potentially, you know, putting their hands up, it's not my business, you know, it's just a part of the culture, that's what happens here. That's no longer kind of excuse that people can label and can use. You know, those conversations have started, and now we're in a position where we need that cultural reset. We need to now look to take action and put things in place where survivors can come forward, that they, you know, they aren't going to be, you know, at risk of losing their job, or it might prohibit kind of, you know, career development or whatever it may be. Is that actually, you know, that we do create these safe spaces for both, you know, everybody who experiences, you know, any form of, you know, harassment and sexual violence. And I think when we look at what the solutions are, and what we look at is that, yes, safe space are part of that, but we need to look at actually, yes, why it's there in the first place, but we need to also kind of accept is that for a long time, I think we've been kind of conditioned to censor ourselves, and to silence kind of ourselves for other people's comfort, and for our own comfort as well. And therefore it's stepping out into this, you know, big unknown naturally, is that, you know, we can no longer be silent, we can no longer be complicit. You know, we need to listen to survivors, listen to their experiences, we need to learn from them, we need to take a moment to reflect, and then we need to actually be putting in place actions. And I think it's great that we've got intimacy coordinators. You know, I think, you know, actors are, you know, they're not there to, you know, to have sex, they're there to, you know, kind of stimulate the sex scenes and things. And I think having somebody there is kind of a safety point to go to and turn to. But, you know, beyond actresses, you know, there's lots of other people, you know, involved in productions and things, and on and off the set. And I think that, you know, sexual harassment doesn't just happen just to actresses or actors, you know, it can happen to anybody. And I think that as a part of kind of the wider kind of like solutions, I think we need to kind of look at education, look at challenging what cultures exist within the industry, and to kind of encourage champions, you know, within workplaces, that, you know, they can be specifically trained to turn to for support, to refer them on specialist support if they need that further support. But ultimately we need to kind of look at that. We have kind of a believe, refer, kind of a respond model where we look at believing, you know, the survivor that comes through, that we don't have any judgment, that we listen and believe them, that we respond, that we make sure that, you know, they have got a safe space to turn to, that they are safe, that, you know, that it's not their fault, and that, you know, they can just have a moment just to breathe and just to explore what options they have going forward in terms of the response, you know, the refer point, which is, you know, do they want to you know, report this? I know that, you know, we talk of, I think it was we work with Era 50/50 and Prime, who are doing fantastic work to kind of address equal representation for actors and all within the UK. And a lot of those kind of addressing kind of the inequalities, you know, before, you know, I'm not just going to say actors here, but, you know, not to say know much about the sector in terms of the film industry, but from what I've kind of learned and absorbed is that before you even go on set, there's already an inequality. And it's, you know, in Era 50/50, you've got Prime and you've got Equity, who are really trying so hard to create some solutions. You know, Equity have created safe spaces so people can report sexual harassment, you know, in a safe measure, and they have those measures already in place. So, and it's not just Equity, but everyone, I suppose, has a role to play when it comes to creating these solutions. And it's just how we can kind of do more of that together. But it's making sure that everyone, it feels comfortable to speak up and not just to stand by, and actually to feel comfortable in responding to somebody, to believe them, to respond and to refer appropriately, and to explore what options they have so they can make an informed decision for themselves without it prohibiting the, you know, trajectory of their career potentially.
Thank you. So Yarit and Teniece, you both are intimacy coaches, and this is pretty a newish role that's been introduced to the industry. Yarit, could you expand on what it is you do? And Teniece, I've got a specific question for you, so I'll come to you afterwards. But really, just can you give us a breakdown of what the intimacy coach's position is on set and what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. To start that off, I kind of need to say where it came from. So the intimacy coordinator for the media side, the recorded media, kind of came off the back of the Me Too movement. It started through the HBO studio that hired Alicia Rodis, and together they created that role. So Alicia was the first intimacy coordinator that kind of coined the practice, and HBO, thankfully for that studio, they created protocols that they're now using for any show that has simulated sex or nudity. And that kind of trickled on to other studios and other production companies, and obviously it came down that way into the UK. So part of the job, it does connect into prevention of sexual harassment, but that is not the only kind of section of the job itself. So the role kind of starts in pre-production, hopefully, and I'm sure Teniece will add to that as well. Whether it's talking with the director and the production company of what the script entails, what information has been given in the casting process to the actors, what do they know that they are required to do, what have they agreed to do within those requirements, all the way down to what are the different departments creating and managing for that shoot of an intimacy scenes. What is in store and how people are collaborating. So when the actors, the director, and the crew gets on set for that day, everything is transparent and they know things ahead of time. So hopefully nothing is kind of thrown at crew or actors on the day. And that's correct what Sarah said regarding that the sexual harassment is not an issue only for the cast. It's a big issue for the crew, because you might have a performer that is totally happy to still wear something that covers their genitals, but not wear a robe between setups. And that's great if they're happy with that. But what about the 50 plus crew that has to work around that? They have to go in and out really quickly, move stuff around, reset the space, check stuff, and they don't want to be clashing against someone's buttocks.
Yeah.
So, you know, the aspects of body and how we protect and how we make a safe space for everyone to be able to do the work really fast and continue is part of the job of an intimacy coordinator, to make sure that that collaboration of protecting everyone on set is with the first AD, the producer that's on set, and that all departments are aware of what's involved in that scene. Obviously, apart from that, the role is very much a choreography-based role or a facilitator-based role to make sure that the performers are happy and they know exactly what they're going to be doing. The director also has a language with the performers, and the intimacy coordinator is there to facilitate that bridge between the ideal that the director would like and what is possible to do under the agreements that the actors have made, and how are they feeling on the day, and how do you actually choreograph that for the angle that the camera needs. There is a kind of a well-being section. However, there's a new role in the UK called the well-being facilitator, which they're taking much more on regarding it, kind of holding the space for mental health on set. But part of our role is to kind of offer ways and make sure that there are things that are put in place. And some productions that didn't have like a sexual harassment or a well-being hotline, I kind of brought that up. When we had, for example, a lot of essays doing simulated sex for a specific scene, it was part of my job to make sure that there's a safety meeting. So everyone is aware, we're briefing everyone, they know who to go to if they feel uncomfortable, which is not only me. So they have various kind of like ladder levels that they can approach. But I will say regarding sexual harassment on set, the fact that a production hires an intimacy coordinator will not make sure that they won't have sexual harassment on set. There are measures that a production needs to take on board, like in HR, that the production office not only puts a hotline on a call sheet, it doesn't start and end there. It has to be much more thought through of how to make sure that the crew and the cast is aware of what are their reporting procedures.
Absolutely. Thank you. Teniece, you know, you're quoted as saying we want to create conscious, dangerous stories and tell from a safe spot. It's that we have, I mean, I guess you've got a creative story and you've got violence in it. You can't shy away from it, potentially. And so there's a need to tell these stories in the best way possible. How, and the well-being that Yarit touched on is something that I want to talk about with you. Is like, do you ever feel, again, the push and pull of being really responsible for people in this position who are doing something that's potentially upsetting them or sensitive to them? How do you, I guess, because there is no HR system in the film industry, is there? So it's like, how do you then report back or feel, how do you, sorry, I'm mumbling my question because there's something in there. How do you then take your, who do you take your issues to when you see something that's going on set you're not happy with and you're not in control of being the intimacy coach?
So I think Yarit touched on what the process looks like and what reporting looks like on set for sexual harassment. There are a couple of things I want to address. As a culture, at least in America, we don't talk about intimacy out in open, and now it's challenging when we're in a workplace and these private moments are now integrated into the workspace. So sometimes people laugh, sometimes people make inappropriate jokes. Does it mean that they're the devil? No, it means that this is how we've been socialized. Right. And again, I'm gonna go to the anti-racist movement again. There are elements in this teaching that shows us don't laugh if something like that happens. Go ahead and ask, why is it funny? Then the individual is now faced with really looking at what they said and maybe dealing with why they feel uncomfortable or why they said that offhand remark. And then we have to get comfortable being able to share that we are uncomfortable. Like when we talk about these movements, it's really important to me, and I raise this for everyone in the room, what is the role of intersectionality? Because we don't want to get in pinning people against one another. We need non-judgment, we need compassion. We need to meet everybody on this spectrum somewhere between hurt and healing. And then we need to be able to engage in conversations. I'm into compassionate communication and restorative justice, places where we can't throw people away, where we have to have hard conversations about our feelings and our wants. And it's challenging because a lot of us might not have this historic practice or access to these tools. So it's really important that we're just all present, that we are not accepting behaviors that make us feel bad, and that we're courageous enough, if we are able to manage the risk and we feel safe, to speak up in real time, or if not, go to other sources for support in that. And you mentioned intersectionality, and I think I read that you said there's a specific need for Black intimacy coordinators due to the hypersexualization of Black bodies in Hollywood. So how important, or how much do you advocate for this in the space that you work in? I just want to say that not every intimacy coordinator should take every job. Sure. Just because you have the skill set, the idea of othering someone in an intimate scenario is very harmful. And this idea of this role, walking around as an expert, very detrimental. We need to remain humble. We need to keep our self-awareness in check. We need checks and balances in our circle. We can't do this work independently, because we need more diversity. Every day I have people being like, I want to be an intimacy coordinator, and not one person is looking at their own specs and being like, well, maybe we're filled with that person or that representation. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should step aside and let someone that doesn't look like me, someone that might be disabled or neurodiverse in the role. But that comes from somebody having to step down or step away. So if we can't get people to get over themselves, we're not going to have access for other individuals. Intersectionality is so important in all these movements, and nothing's more depressing than being like, oh, consent culture. For everyone that doesn't look like me, what's happening here? I'm very confused. To fully understand. We have a few questions. Time's rapidly going. But Ted, I wanted to quickly come to you and ask, look, you know, we're in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder and the impact it had on the world, Black men being seen as predators. So how do you speak to Black men about manhood and the pressures that Black manhood means inside the community and in wider community? You know, the image of the Black male rapist hungry for a white woman victim is not far from most people's mind, but that's been something we've been inundated with racially, and that intersectionality again about the Black male predator. So how do you speak to Black men about manhood? You're still on mute.
Thank you. We speak to Black men about manhood like we speak to all men about manhood, but it is, as Teniece says, and you bring up, Akua, that it's around the intersectionality of it. So we're not just coming in as men who are in this sexist patriarchal construct and living out these messages, these rigid notions of manhood that often look hyper masculine, and in the Black community, even maybe more so, because we, when you look at the expression of dominance, power over someone, the things that men are taught, and that, you know, white men get to act those things out in all these different ways, right? They're the ones making the decisions. They're the ones in control of business. They're the ones running this country in so many ways. And Black men looking to do that as well in our own way. And oftentimes that gets played out just within our community. It's all harmful. You know, this man box that we talk about, whether it's white men, Black men, or people of color, indigenous men, men of color, I should say, it's all harmful. And not only harmful as women, girls, and those who don't conform to the binary at all, but also men and boys. We die 6 years earlier than women. Suicide is about 3.5 times higher among men than women. And these are mainstream statistics. So then when you look at people of color, the lower you're valued in the society, the higher the issues are. And that's why Black women are harmed the most. Women of color are harmed the most. The response toward what's happening to them is the least because of how this racist construct works. So when we unpack all those things, whether it's white men or Black men, it's all kind of this, that man box is harming all of us. Anxiety and depression go untreated. In the US, it's estimated around 6 million. It's much more than that, especially if you look at the trauma that Black men experience on a daily basis, just going outside, the trauma that we experience. And that's why with the incredible sadness around Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, all that's happened just in the last year. Now, this has always been going on, of course. We know that. The white community is realizing that on a different level. But I mean, I'm triggered all the time. My kids are triggered all the time. And I know that if I'm triggered, I know Black women are triggered all the time too, right? Because those same systems that are on us as Black men are on Black women, and we're on top of them too with our own oppression. So there's a lot. My hope, though, is that there's an awakening, there's a purging that's occurring, that we all get an opportunity, whether it's based on gender or based on race or classism or religion, that we get an opportunity to reflect and reset. Mm. And what I'm also hopeful that I believe that as men, we want what's best for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, and communities for our country as well. So this conversation is nuanced, but it's something that we really need to continue to push forward. As I'm hearing everyone share, I'm thinking that, you know, when we look at HR policies or things that happen either in any workplace, you can legislate, you can pass policy, but it's about a culture shift. And what if this conversation was brought in at the beginning of a project, beginning of a production, to say, okay, this is what we're talking about here. Moving forward in that production, I would think people are going to be much more open to share what's going on and much more aware. So my hope is that for men in general, for Black men and for all men and white men as well, and those decision makers, because most of the decision makers in the entertainment industry are white men, right? And in many other industries are white men, that we look at this as an opportunity to learn and be better, and that challenging privilege and entitlement is not against anybody, right? And that we know at A Call to Men that the liberation of men is directly tied to the liberation of women. When women are truly free, we are free. The liberation of Black folks, of white folks, is directly tied to the liberation of Black folks. There's so much to gain. There's so much to gain for all of us. So, and I would also like to say that we're all swimming in the same water. This is not an indictment of anyone or anything. It's really an invitation to all of us that we need to do some things differently. And as we reflect and reset, we also need to know when it's sexual harassment in the workplace, that this is the first generation of men being held accountable for something men have always gotten away with. So we don't even have a language for it. And that's why men are often on their heels, and we blame women for the situation. That's what we do. In a sexist society, you lean toward giving men the benefit of the doubt. That's why women are often in the position where they're like, well, they just come to expect the behavior from men, right? And that men don't confront other men because of that same silence, that same sexism that exists. So this is the first generation of men being held accountable. And that's why men are on their heels and blaming for women in the workplace for sexual harassment. Like, oh, I'm not going to have a closed door meeting with women, as if when the doors were closed, women were the problem, right? It's the same thing as saying a woman is raped and questioning what she had on. It's the same thing.
Thank you. I wanted to, I mean, you're right. The conversation is so important. And even me as a woman, I'm struggling. Not that I'm not struggling, but it's just finding the right language. As Teniece rightly said, we've got to watch our language. We've got to think about how we interact with each other. It's not about the blame game. It's how we come together and share our stories and find common ground, because it shouldn't be that we're pitted against each other. We need to come together. People shouldn't feel attacked. We also need to be honest, and people need to hold themselves accountable from all perspectives. Question from the audience. Addy says, and this is open to anyone to answer, as a man, how can I respectfully but precisely highlight that sexual harassment of any level will not be tolerated on my sets? And he goes on to say, they go on to say, most men define sexual harassment as groping or rape or more extreme forms of sexual harassment, but don't understand that and often misjudge, making sexual comments, flirting, and all things like that of the maybe more subtle nature can also be definitively defined as sexual harassment and inappropriation. So it's about conveying the language. And again, it's for people not to feel attacked and that their whole being is being questioned, but actually, how do you become more sociably, I don't know, integrated a bit with, and by not offending people, and open the floor to anyone who wants to answer.
Well, I would just like to reiterate that it's not about individual men doing these terrible things. It's about all of us and our own, that we're all in this thing together as men, and that yes, we'll see someone cross the line where it's a, and even to be able to say cross the line speaks to our privilege and entitlement, doesn't it? That we get to determine where that line is because it's often a physical line where, well, I'm against sexual assault, but did you see the blah, blah, blah on that woman, right? So it's all the same. It's the same water we're swimming in. So I would suggest to that great question is to, again, bring this conversation in the beginning of a project around shifting the culture around sexual objectification, around respect for women, around equity on the set.
Sarah, thank you very much. Sarah, would you have anything to contribute? Because it is about how to relay this information to people in a way that doesn't offend anyone.
Yeah, I think starting off by just having those conversations, and I think having resources available to share to people on set, so they, people learn and absorb things in different ways, sometimes reading things, sometimes maybe like video resources that people can watch little videos to identify actually what is sexual harassment, like what what constitutes, what are forms of sexual harassment, and give like explicit examples that could be relevant to like on set or that's relevant to the industry. And I think that those kind of resources should be available for people to share and to take it upon themselves to learn and to take some accountability for how they're behaving on set and contributing towards standing up to this type of behavior.
May I add something?
Yes, of course, please.
I just want to say too, this whole binary thought of right and wrong is really getting us stuck. And people don't want to make mistakes, whereas we're human. When we make mistakes, normally those are lessons. So again, I go back to the anti-racism movement. If we're stuck in being a bad person, we're not even going to engage in the work. People don't learn from a state of shame or guilt. They get stuck and confused. So we got to keep softening and rounding these edges so that we can be messier and more compassionate for one another, so that we're being our full selves in a space and not just pretending.
Thank you very, very much. Go ahead, Yarit.
Just to kind of piggyback on all of that, at the moment in the UK, if you want to go back on set, you have to do a coronavirus awareness course. And it kind of made me think, after the Me Too movement, there was no requirement to do some sort of bullying and harassment short to, I don't know, 40 minutes kind of course, not for heads of departments, not for crew within each department. I think it is about raising an awareness, and also part of that awareness is what Teniece said, that the corners are much rounded. Because if we raise the awareness that we're actually human, and this is what a harassment for some people can look like, then we're actually making sure that we're educating ourselves before we come onto set.
Thank you very much. I think we've got time for one more question. Someone anonymous has asked, how do we challenge the idea of jumping on the bandwagon or contributing to a witch hunt? How do we challenge disbelief around stories breaking in the media on celebrities we perhaps are shocked and disappointed by? So yeah, it's that bandwagon thing. Things become a fad. Racism is in, so now diversity is in, and now Time's Up is in. How do we, I guess the people on the outside looking at all these headlines and trying to, we're so judgeful as a community, as a people. So how do we remove this judgment and be a bit more diligent and work out for ourselves how we support without joining this witch hunt? And as Teniece said, as Ted has said, is removing the word predator and having a more rounded approach to how we view things. Again, open to anyone. Maybe Elli, do you want to come in and say something?
Again, a tricky one to answer, but of course, media has a huge role in this. We need to remember. But I think looking this thing from this the most equal country, from the Nordic countries side, and when we follow the Me Too movement happening, and super closely, of course, it was part of the conversation that it was kind of like seems to happen somewhere else than in our actual own everyday life or even in our country. And it's sort of like that it's still happening. So we kind of like try to find these boxes and kind of like, okay, it's happening in Hollywood, doesn't include my life, or Time's Up, what does it mean? It's kind of like that, it sort of like simplifies the super complicated question, because we tend to kind of like find the right or wrong and how to behave. And I haven't even counted how many times I have been asked, like after the Force of Habit film, which leaves, it can be really haunting experience for many, actually realizing that how does it feel? How does it feel to be afraid during your whole life, in everyday life? And the question is that, what do we do now? What's the solution now? And it's like, well, that's the question you need to ask every day from yourself. And for me, at least, it's sort of like, it's not, there's no answer in there. The answer is in you, and it's in the mirror, and it will come to you every day and many times in a day, and accept that. And it will never be kind of like ready, set. And I think that's something that we should kind of like be acceptance, like in this complicated issue. It's not going anywhere. It's here, and we can have it. That's my answer.
Very much. And unfortunately, it's time to go. I mean, there's so much we can talk about. It's never enough time. But I think at least we've scratched a little bit of the tip of the iceberg as to how we have some solution and some resolution. And so just thank you, everybody, for all the work that you do. And we have to keep talking. We have to stay connected. And I'm in this small space, I've learned a lot. I'm going to watch my language. Teniece, you read me. Thank you very much. But it's good. This is what it is. You've got to hear difficult stuff and learn how to process it and be a better person. That's all we need. So thank you very much.
And I just want to say, way to show the fact that we can get new information and change our mind. That's where our healing is. So bravo, and thanks so much for having us.
No, and thank you to Raindance 16 Films and everybody. Really appreciate it. You can all get on with your Saturdays. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Be
you.
well, everyone. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Well.